Back over to him to start, but I just wanted to get us on the roll of the agenda for tonight. Due to the mayor not being here right now, and I guess I'll kick it off and allow, as the agenda says, just 1 second, I'm sorry, I want to make sure that. Yeah, absolutely. So I want to skip over that and just really talk about why we decided to set this up before we allow the Mayor Buckley to give his messages. But just due to the recent increase in violent crimes over the course of the last couple of weeks within our communities, it's obviously extremely concerning to us as elected officials and to you guys as citizens. And that's kind of how this meeting came about. We had citizens reach out to us as elected officials and demand that we hold a public meeting to hold ourselves accountable for what we ran on and for what we promised, and that's to help put a decrease and to a stop to the violent crimes that continue to take place in our city. Like I said, we obviously take this very, very seriously, and we have a number of individuals who are here to speak tonight and give their perspective on their roles within the criminal justice system and how this plays out. So the mayor is not here yet, so I'd like to start things off with our state's attorney, Ann Colt-Litis, and allow her to give the perspective on how this all works out within the judicial system. And then we can follow up with maybe 2 or 3 questions for Ann, and then we'll continue throughout the agenda. Thank you, guys.
Hi, good evening. I'm Ann Colt-Litis. I'm your state's attorney, and my office prosecutes everything from serious traffic offenses all the way up to murder. And one thing I wanted to share with you, one of the great things about our office, even though we are 100% or maybe 99.9% funded by Anne Arundel County's budgetary and taxation, we give a lot of services to Annapolis City as well. We have prosecutors who are dedicated to prosecuting only the cases that occur in Annapolis. And this past year, we were able to get funding to hire 2 paralegals that work with the Annapolis Police Department and our Annapolis prosecutors on body-worn camera. If you all know, we have body-worn cameras here in Annapolis, and a lot of very important material is captured on those body-worn cameras that we then have to process in our office to make sure that we protect victims of crime whose names are on the body-worn camera, their telephone numbers, where they work, their addresses, that sort of thing. So our paralegals are able to process that very important evidence before we send it out to defendants and defense attorneys. So I'm very excited that that's happened since I've been in office. One of the pushes, along with prosecuting serious crimes, is also to try and divert less serious crimes and to have people have the opportunity to go through drug treatment court. We have a veterans court. We have diversion programs for simple possession. And we are trying to emphasize rehabilitative services as much as we can for low-level offenders. We have 55 attorneys in the office, about 127 or 130 employees total. We have duty attorneys every day, so if you ever have a legal question that pertains to criminal law, you can give us a call. We have a mediation department that deals if you have a dispute with your neighbor, if your neighbor is cutting down your bushes and you're about to get into a fist fight with your neighbor, don't do that. Give us a call and we will try and help you work it out. We meet regularly with various members of the police department here in Annapolis as well as Anne Arundel County Police, and we have a great bond with them. So since I've been in office, I'm very pleased to say that we have been able to increase our diversity in our staff and have it be more representative of our community. And I'm very privileged to be a part of this office. Right now, I'm also involved in the prosecution of the Capital Gazette homicide, which has just been rescheduled to June of this year. So I had left some pamphlets in the backs with some information for you. We are very interested in helping the community in any way we can, so you can always give my office a call. I have a communications director. If you have any concerns, we'll come out and speak to your community group. We talk to schools and churches and temples and that sort of thing about different ways to keep yourself from becoming a victim of a crime. We have a community outreach program, and we talk to different groups every week, and we're available to come out to to your event if you'd like. So if anybody has any questions, I'm supposed to take 2 to 3 questions. Yes, sir.
Is the processing of a crime from a HUD person who's living in a project, does that go through your office? It goes through the city?
What kind of crime?
And any kind of crime, shooting,
Sure.
assault?
Yes.
Okay. Does that go through your office, and what is your relationship to HUD and how you enforce the HUD guidelines
So we
in
wouldn't.
that area?
No, we don't enforce HUD guidelines. We work with the Annapolis Police Department, Maryland State Police, Anne Arundel County Police. And any case that's brought to us either by a police officer, police department, or a citizen, any citizen here can go down and swear out charges against another citizen. So we don't work directly with HUD. What we enforce are all the crimes, assaults, trespass, burglary, those sorts of things. That's what we prosecute. I saw a question back there, sir.
Strike on your opening remarks, but my question is there an easy way for us to look at the judicial record? Now, what I mean is by the sentencing that was given to certain people that involved violent crimes, and then what the judge, what the conviction was, and then what was the sentencing by the judge, especially crimes involving weapons.
Sure.
Because my sense is, I'm a data guy, and I would like to see what the judges are doing in the way of sentencing, to see if people that commit violent crimes with weapons go to jail and stay in jail.
Right. So the easiest way that you can do that is you can go to the clerk's office. I hate to say it, but you have to do it the old-fashioned way. Every single violent crime that's prosecuted here in Anne Arundel County, if it's a circuit court case, will have a Maryland sentencing guidelines. And so every crime has a point system. Every defendant has a point system based on prior record. If there's a gun, there's points. If it's a young victim or an older victim, there's points. If there's serious physical injury, there are points. And so as long as the judge is in that guideline sentencing range, they are doing an appropriate job. We do want an independent judiciary. We do not want judges pressured to find somebody guilty or to find somebody not guilty, because the worst thing that could ever happen is a judge making a decision not because of what the facts are in the law, but because of political pressure. So you may see cases, and I can tell you this happens all the time, you may see cases and you say, why did this person get the maximum sentence? Well, sometimes the cases are not as strong as you might think. Not everything is the same amount of evidence. But when we have the evidence and it's a violent crime, we go for it. If we don't, we can't. We are stuck with what the facts are of the cases. So as long as you see a judge is within that Maryland sentencing guidelines, and those are set by the legislature and the Maryland judiciary, there's a whole legislative team that works on that. And so as long as the judge is within those sentencing guidelines, I can tell you they're doing an okay job. Yeah.
I just wanted to, I think with Steve's question, can you just clarify for everyone here, because I know there's a lot of misconceptions about the housing authority properties, and can you just clarify as to, I think a lot of people, I know that there are people who believe that those are HUD-owned properties, or they are federal properties, or they are somehow different than other properties in the rest of Annapolis and therefore might be treated differently. And I wonder if you could just speak to that so that everyone is, understands what the housing authority properties are and whether or not they are federal properties or whether they are just private properties that are managed by the housing authority.
So I am not as adept in that particular question. I can tell you what it used to be. It used to be that those were private properties and managed by various groups. So there are rules about trespassing or no trespassing and that sort of thing. So the police, as I understand it, still have the authority. Okay, so let the housing authority answer that. But if a crime occurs and the police are called, the police are going to investigate it. And we prosecute those cases where we can. I mean, that's my best question. And we can work with those various groups, but I don't work directly with HUD. Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you so much. We have a lot of pamphlets in the back, and if you need to reach out to us, we'll come and speak to your community group. And if you have questions in the future, you want to send them to me in advance, I'll be sure to talk to you, okay? Thank you. Thank you.
That was the perspective that we mentioned from the side of the judicial system. We'll now hear from our mayor, Gavin Buckley, and then we'll continue with the agenda. Thanks.
How you all doing? Thank you so much for coming out on President's Day. I also want to thank you. I'm only just getting back into town this weekend. I want to thank you all for the kindness and the love that you've shown to my family during this time. And hopefully we can use that same approach to get to the bottom of these situations and these things that are occurring in our community. I'm here to listen. Every one of these gunshots that goes off could be the next murder in this city. It could be somebody's mother, somebody's father, one of our kids. We know the seriousness of gun violence. I've left a country that has violent video games, it has violent movies, it has mental health issues, but the one thing it doesn't have is easy access to weapons. And we are at a point in time where we have great coordination between the city, the county, and the state in terms of how we can get some of these guns off of the street and understand the social conditions that are causing these things. We have to have an understanding of that. I can tell you this city council, myself, our highest priority is to get investment into areas that need it the most. When people feel hopeless, when people feel that we've given up on them, they give up on themselves. And so we have to show that our highest priority is our most marginalized population. These events that are happening around those areas are obviously a byproduct of things that a lot of us don't have to deal with because we come from it. We're luckier in life than some other people. So I'm here to listen. This is a great community that we live in. We always step up in times of challenge. We always come together when we need to come together. So thank you all for being here, and I'd like to get on and listen to what you have to say. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Mayor Buckley. Next up, Alderman Rhonda Pindell-Charles, the chairwoman of the Public Safety Committee, will come up and briefly speak to what the Public Work Safety Committee is working on, and then take some brief questions. Thanks.
Thank you, Alderman Gay. Good evening to everyone. As the Public Safety Chair for our City Council, I work closely with our Police Department, our Fire Department, and our Office of Emergency Management. Like Ann, we were both prosecutors in Baltimore City, so I have a particular interest, especially in making sure that our public safety is intact and that all persons within our city feel safe in their homes and out on the street. What I tried to do this evening in preparation for this meeting was to take all of the emails that we had received and synthesize that information and put it together somewhat in an agenda form. I know Alderman Arnett and Alderman Gay are the leaders of this evening's event, but I just wanted to make sure that we had some sort of guideline in here. We have our mayor's message, our message from Jess Packler, who initiated much of this. Our meetings and just a general information about the meetings, the history by our delegate Shanika Henson, what we saw as some of the illegal activities based on the information and the emails that you sent us, the impact on our children, our families, our partners, our communities, and our partners that have expressed an interest to work diligently with us, who and what agency is responsible for what, and I think Ann touched on that a few minutes ago. Our goals, strategies, and solutions going forward, our challenges and our barriers, what our police department can do. Also, our city manager is here and the different departments that lend their expertise to the different issues that we have here. Any options that we have, legislation that might be in process, the lawsuit that is currently underway, and nevertheless the hope and prayers that we have for a improved community. Also, we received information from our state delegation, and we could use this kind of as a homework assignment for the next meeting, looking at all of the information that our county Gun Violence Task Force gave to us, and our delegation provided this information to us. We can look at these as short, mid-term, and long-term goals, and also some information from Delegate Henson, as well as Delegate Kane and Senator Elbrecht. So just trying to synthesize this information as a guideline for everyone that you can use this evening and going forward. I hope that it is helpful. Thank you very much. I made 50 copies, so if you can share, please do so. If you would like this, I can send it to you by email. You can let me know what your email address is. Thank you very much.
Are there any questions at this point for Alderman Charles?
Thank you. My name is Charles Hernick, and I think that many of you in this room do know me through my association with the Eastport Civic Association. And I think that many of you on the chairs up there do know that as part of the association and in my daily life, I try to work in a positive manner to be constructive. I don't have a lot of time tonight. It's President's Day. My parents are watching my infant child for 45 minutes so I could come to this meeting, a meeting that I wasn't planning to attend. We are here not to get updates on what you all are planning. We're here to figure out how you're going to solve a problem. Chief Jackson, the honeymoon is over. It's time to get busy and fix this problem of recurring violence. There's a certain amount of violence that's normal in any big city, in any size city. But the routine patterns that we see in Eastport are not normal. I will not accept them as normal. And we will hold you accountable to assure that my neighbors and my wife and my children can sleep at night. That's not asking for a lot. Mayor Buckley, please make safety your top priority. There are a lot of things that can be done to make Annapolis fun and a groovy place to be. But we need the streets clean, and we need the criminals off the street, and we need it to be safe from violence. You were so bold as to ask people for your vote in this room the last time that you were here. That's not at all assured, unless violence and safety is a top concern. These remarks are from me, Charles Hernick, 314 Adams Street. Not associated with the Civic Association, not associated with the safety recommendations that we have promised to deliver to you, and we will do so soon. This is just me, a citizen who votes and who shows up on President's Day so I can get home in 15 minutes to put my baby to sleep. I hope you can use the next 15 minutes to tell me and the people in this room what you are going to do to respond to the specific actions, not all the planning, the specific actions that happened last week. Thank you.
Excuse me, sir. Have you had an opportunity to take a look at what has been prepared? Because there are some specific strategies and solutions that we have in here.
I just showed up along with everybody else, and I was on the email thread, so unless there's new information.
Did you see what was safe stations and some other things that we had in here?
I haven't had the chance to read everything. I'm all ears for the next 15 minutes.
Okay. Well, peruse that and take a look at it, sir. Well, I made 50. I'm sorry. If you all could share, please, I would really appreciate that. Thank you so very much. Yes, sir.
No disrespect, ma'am, those are not solutions, because some of those have not been implemented yet. So those are some projected ideas, literally, but we literally want to see some solutions. And no disrespect, Chief Jackson, Mayor Buckley. My name is Demetrius Sambanis, recently retired federal agent. Started my career with Harford County many, many years ago. And a couple of things that we have to address here. I have to be brutally honest with you. Our law enforcement is our first defense to crime. We have to combat crime. If we don't support them, nothing's going to happen, okay? We can't dance around this. We can't be overly politically correct. You have to assemble a task force to go after the gun violence. Literally, I did it in Harford County, and it was successful. You have to do it here. We have to support our police. You have to have the resources and the tools, but you have to have the proper training and the support from the community and the support from the mayor. Once again, another thing, no disrespect to you, Chief Jackson, but I understand you were not MPTC certified. You fell out of compliance. Is that correct?
No, no.
So you are MPTC certified?
I don't have to be.
Well, I understand you don't have to be, but here's a dilemma. As a taxpayer, we're paying your salary, but you cannot hold evidence, you cannot make arrests, you technically cannot carry a firearm unless HR 218 is covering you, but that isn't as an official, that is as a retired law enforcement officer. No disrespect, sir, but one of the first steps, you need to be successful in your agency, and like, if you want to...
I'll talk. That's not
Okay,
true,
I understand
sir.
that, sir.
That's
People
not
in
true.
this room need to know this.
But
Yeah.
a 2-week compliance course will bring you up to par with the current laws, okay? And I know you're way out of compliance with MPTC certification. I understand as administrator, you can be the chief, but once again, you can't physically make arrests, you can't physically process or hold evidence. And you are another tool in the department to help your officers out, which means you can't patrol the streets with them, and you can't work with them side by side, and it also affects morale. And I'm just saying, you need to start somewhere. You start at the top. So, that's all I have to say.
Sir, I misspoke. I meant to say police substation satellite offices, not substations. I'm sorry. Thank you.
Excuse me, can I like to say one thing? My name is Ronaldo. Hey folks, we all here together tonight. Let's not start throwing stuff at each other. Let's try to work together as a team and we can get stuff more done than us pointing fingers at this one and pointing fingers at this one. If we get together and work together, I think we can get a whole lot more out of me pointing my finger at this lady and somebody pointing their finger at this person. Everybody's here trying to work together and everything. Let's give them enough respect and see what they have to offer us. Or if we want to do this, help be on one of those committees that might want to come up tonight and you be one of the ones to help instead of pointing fingers at each other and slamming stones at each other. I mean, if you turn the thing around and say if you was up there, you wouldn't want all that kind of commotion coming your way.
Right.
Ms. Charles,
Yes, sir.
in our year-long appeal we had about the shopping center, we proved that the calculation of the number of required police officers fell short of what it should be. We showed that there should be 5 more police officers on the police force by the code, by the comprehensive plan, and we're wondering if you guys, you already have that verdict from the appeals board. Have you taken action in the city council with the mayor and the chief of police to take action to hire those 5 police officers?
I know Alderman Gay has been working on that issue, and he could better speak to it than I can.
Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll run down the legislation that we're currently working on. Some things that we have in the draft, some things that you'll see in the next couple of weeks. Number one, I just submitted legislation for what we're, what we're calling the nuisance crime management bill. And so basically what this bill does is it requires that if a property, if we can identify a property that has consecutive shootings, they are required to submit a 30-day plan to the Annapolis Public Safety Committee. That 30-day plan will be reviewed, and within the plan it presents details and ideas to cut down on that crime within the respective community, whether it be recreational ideas, economic or educational opportunities to kind of push away those acts within that respective community. And I'm really excited about that legislation because I think it allows the individual property managers within our communities, our public safety committee, and our police department to work together on ways to prevent that. Also within that legislation, if the property is deemed a nuisance for 2 consecutive months in a row, the property managers are then required to sit through a remediation session with the chief of police and identified city staff to fix those issues within the property in a timely manner. And I'm extremely, again, passionate about this piece of legislation because I think it puts the right people in the room to start communicating together. Secondly, one of the underlying issues that we talk about are just the social services issues that are not provided within those communities. You can arrest an individual 18 times and they'll commit 18 more crimes. And part of the issue that I have with the arrests within our communities is that we have young men, ages 18 to 23, often on their 2nd or 3rd trip to the police, or on their 2nd or 3rd trip to jail, or having some interaction with the police department. So these, along with myself, Alderman Ross Arnett, Alderwoman Sheila Finlayson, and Alder Pendell Charles, we've drafted this legislation for the office, what we're now calling Office of Community Service Engagement.
Community caring.
Community caring engagement. Excuse me. Charles, I shared your frustration. I want my family members and my neighbors to sleep comfortable just as you like to do the same. So I think that it's critical and it's important that we focus on these issues, and that has been our priority, and it will continue to do so. And we also, as a city council, we've met when we fully support our chief of police as he moved forward and to tackle these issues within the city of Annapolis as well. Jessica?
I appreciate that you're stating some actual things that are going forward, because I think that's what we need tonight. We have listened a lot. I have lived in my house on President Street for 21 years. I have been to this meeting multiple times. I have listened to the stories. It has happened. It just keeps happening. Nothing changes. The administrations change. The council people mostly change. But the same things keep happening. And we all know the stories. What we want are the actionable items. I like that idea of the code, but you know that city code already says that if the police department makes 3 or more documented calls for service in a 30-day period to a licensed premise in response to complaint of disorderly conduct or disturbing the peace, or licensees violates any provision of Chapter 1740 or 1744, they may order that the licensee show cause within 30 days why the operating license for that property should not be suspended. This is in code, right? I am really excited that Melissa is here tonight, because I think the Housing Authority, I think the important thing that we need to say is that we are all neighbors, right? It doesn't matter who pays our mortgage or our rent. It doesn't matter what kind of home we live in, whether it's an apartment or a single family home, whether it's a small apartment or a multi-million-dollar mansion on the water. We are all neighbors, and we have to get past this divide of your neighborhood and my neighborhood, or this neighborhood and that neighborhood, because it doesn't get us anywhere, right? We are all neighbors. I am neighbors with every single person who lives in this room, and particularly when I'm told that somehow somebody who lives in Harbor House, an apartment of which is 20 feet from my front door, is in a different neighborhood than I am, I find that insulting. It's not. I find it insulting to them and to me. We live in the same neighborhood, and we need to work together. The Housing Authority is a lot of things, but at its very core, they are property managers. They are managing property, just like the managers at Watergate are property managers, just like the people at Shearwater are property managers, and any other of the multi-family unit housings, just like my next door neighbor with a multi-family unit in his house is a property manager. And what we need to come up with is a way to make sure that the property management, I feel like if I already said this before, I think, right? Haven't I? I feel like dozens of times, has to be taken care of first for all of our properties that are having police issues and problems. It's in the city code. That is your job. That is planning and zoning's job. That is the city's job, is to make sure. And I don't want people kicked out on the street. I don't want a property to lose its rental license and those families to have to leave because the property management isn't being done the right way, but there have to be consequences. We cannot continue to live this way. I was talking to a 12-year-old girl the other day that thought she got shot at 2 o'clock in the morning because there was a gunfight right outside her window. I thought that my house had been hit on Tuesday night. None of us can live this way anymore, and we need solutions. We don't need listening. We don't need you listening to our stories of how bad things are. We need you fixing how bad things are. I can't stand here and do this anymore.
Thank you, Jessica, very much for that. I agree on the sentiments that we start to work together as a community and separate that invisible line of both 6 and 8. So I appreciate that. Next up, we'll hear from Alderman Ross Arnett in regards to some of the financing and funding that we'll use as we move forward over the course of the next month to fix some of these issues. Thanks. Thank you, Ross.
Thank you, Dewan. First of all, I think we need to recognize some of the people in the room. We have Senator Sarah Elfrith, Delegate King, Delegate Hinson. We have Alderwoman Finlayson, Alderwoman Tierney. I think pretty much all of the city council is here, and you have some very high-level members of the higher jurisdictions of government. So I think that's an indication that people are taking this seriously. You elect the council to do basically two things: to do legislation and to vote on the budget. The budget is where the money comes from for the police department to do their job. When I first got on the council, the number of authorized police officers was 115. That was moved up to 118. Recently, we moved it up to 132. The Board of Appeals action that Steve Rogers just referred to indicates that it probably should be 128. When Mayor Moyer, who's in the back, was here under Chief Johnson, we had 132 officers. The things that the council has been doing relative to the budget is we are authorizing to hire a full complement of officers. In the recent negotiations, we've dramatically increased the salary of the officers. We've also given them take-home cars, which makes us competitive. We struggle to get officers because every jurisdiction is trying to find officers. But, and maybe the chief will speak to this when he's up there, policing doesn't guarantee security. Policing is reactive. And that's why one of the programs that Alderwoman Finlayson and I are doing, we hope to complement what Chief Jackson was hired here to do, and that is to change the way we're policing, and I think he'll speak to that in a minute. And that is moving from, as Alderman Gay said, giving people a longer criminal record to giving people ways to get out of that cycle. And this Office of Community Caring Services is a way to move from arrest to assist, but assist means we actually have to assist. We don't have any facility in the city. We do have some in the mayor's office, and the mayor's been very good about that. In fact, Will Rao and Atola are here, but that's not enough. So we have to give people the opportunity to get out of that cycle. And so what we want to do is to start this office to provide the direction to the actual connection to the social services that can start to help to break the cycle. Now, Charles, I think, had to leave, and I understand his frustration and the frustration of all of you in this room. These things did not happen overnight, and they're not going to get fixed overnight. But I can say that under Mayor Buckley's administration, he has taken these issues to heart. We are doing the things that we need to do. They're never going to be as fast as you want. And when you hear a gunshot, that's instantaneous. You all know from watching us, legislation is not instantaneous, and the impacts of legislation take longer. So I know that's not a satisfying answer. I know that you want some kind of guarantee tonight that we have a 3-step program or a 12-step program that is going to make things better next month. I wish I could promise you that, but if I did, I think you would know that I'm lying to you. It's not going to happen that quickly. There have to be changes in the culture in the city, the culture in the housing. I think if Melissa gets up and you read her editorial in the Capitol over the weekend, you will understand the difficulties that she's going through. The federal government is cutting back with the resources, and we're making things worse and worse and worse in the public housing. And I think we're giving people a more and more depressed attitude towards living in the city. That's not going to be good for anybody. That's going to make things go down, down, down. But who's speaking next, Luan? Or I'll take questions, but I think you really...
I have a statement based on what you said. And I think Jess just said she's been having this conversation for 20 years, and I've been attending for 12 years. So this is not something new. So to your point that it's not going to happen tomorrow or get corrected tomorrow or next month, we've been talking about this for a very long time.
Right.
So we've been asking for solutions for 20 years, for 12 years.
Let me turn it around, because I've been watching the email stream, and I will acknowledge you're all more creative than I am. What do you think the solutions are?
I'm not going to tell you the solutions. I'm in cybersecurity. If you want to know something about cybersecurity, check with me. You're police, you're law enforcement. I'm looking for you guys to come up with solutions.
I've only been a resident here for 3 years. I grew up in New York City, near the West Village, and my high school was in what was referred to then as Hell's Kitchen, known to you as maybe West Side Story area. The difference, and I lived for about 35, 40 years in DC, all over different parts of DC. The difference are cops. I don't see any cops. I see their cars driving by, but I don't see them on the street. About 6 months ago, I was over at the Eastport Mall, shopping mall over here, and I was accosted by a young woman, wanted to know if I wanted to have sex. The last time that happened to me was in 1961 in Greenwich Village. There is nothing that I think replaces a cop on the beat. It's a security for the community, and I think it's a deterrent to crime. I'm willing to look at the data, and I can understand how this is maybe either not, so terribly efficient use of resources. Be that as it may, I look around here compared to where I lived in Lower Manhattan and in Washington, D.C., I don't see any cops. I don't see any cops. I see their cars blacked out. You can't see their faces. They drive by, and that's it. That's all I see of any police presence. And I don't know how you can control crime and criminal behavior without boots on the street.
So I think this is the perfect segue to the chief, but let me say two things. One, I'm happy you don't see some of the police because they're out there and we really don't want you to see them, but they're out there. Secondly, it is the reason that we hired the chief is to move to a new policing model, and I think we do need to hear from the chief what that model is. If your complaint to the council is that we're not doing enough budget or we're not legislating enough programs, we can accept that. We, none of the elected officials here, do the policing. That is the administration, and when we hear from the administration, you can ask those questions of them. Yes, ma'am.
I have a question. I looked all the way back to 2013. And the solutions that, or the suggestions that you've been making with regards to the soft fixes for the problem have been going back to 2013.
Under the speaker, go forward or back.
Order back. Can you hear me? I think you can probably hear me.
Yes.
You have a 2017-2019 crime plan, Annapolis does.
Yep.
Where are we? Where are we with that? Because beat cops have been suggested since 2013. And like this gentleman said, I don't see police on the street. I see them after a shooting. I see them sitting on the corners and there's a big, huge presence. But I do not see them. I do not see them any other time. And the shooting we had last summer, where they were actually driving through the neighborhood shooting at each other, and I was finding bullets in the street, the police officer that responded to me said, I said, where were you yesterday? And he's like, look, we're here today, and we're out in force. It's too late.
So again, I think that is a question to the chief. I'll take a couple of others, but I think it is time that we hear from...
I'd like to speak up for the police department, please. 3 weeks ago, my wife was mugged 30 feet off of Boucher Avenue in our fully lit, floodlit driveway. And as we had 2 cars coming, she got out a little early, and out of the shadows, because it's quite a lush area we are, came a very tall object. He was about 5'11", looked like he outweighed me, and he was totally wearing a black ski mask, black gloves, black all the way down to his shoes, totally dark. This is 9:15. I was getting out of the second car, and I guess this person didn't see me, because as I came up, approaching my wife, he had by that time accosted her and said in loud tone, "Give me your purse," which happened to be a tote bag. And she says, "You're not taking my tote bag." Unfortunately, I guess Hungarians fight back. And she says, "I'm watching 4 feet away." a person having a tug of war with my wife. He had one hand, his left hand, on the bag, and the right hand in his pocket, looking like he was simulating a pistol. So what do you do? Here's the thing with you. What do you do? I'm staring at this person 4 feet away. I reached in my pocket thinking that I'll call the police. Unfortunately, I have an iPhone 7 Plus, and it jammed in my pocket. And later on, one of the officers said, that probably saved your life. Very easily, you could be laying in blood next to your wife if you tried to play NRA. So anyway, I sort of watched this go on. They tugged and tugged for probably 15 seconds, and finally he knocked her down, and she let go, and off he went out onto Boucher and up Madison. Now, out of nowhere appears the Annapolis police officer who must have had duty in Harbor House, because he appears out of nowhere and passes this fellow going up Madison into Harbor House. And what are we going to do? Let's call 911. He must have called 911 in himself, because all of a sudden it's starting to rain police. I mean, they were coming out of the sky. We had 7 officers online looking and working. We went in the house to call 911, and I discovered that she had left in her purse her iPhone. And it was and on our iPad, it showed his location. It was still broadcasting his location. And it showed a specific building in Harbor House. I gave it to the sergeant in charge who was there. He looked at it, called the command center at the police department, and they called up their camera and actually saw a person going into that building shown by the iPhone. This person, who probably may not have been the cleverest of all, left that iPhone running for an hour, broadcasting his position. As soon as the sergeant saw that, he deployed some officers up to that building. And now they had a position in the building, but what they didn't have was which apartment. Now, this is what you call clever cops. They found out they could dial her number and it would ring. And they went down, and an officer went down the hallway listening at every door, and finally heard my wife's iPhone ringing. And they figured, that's it. And they staked it out. Now here's what, it's impossible for let me talk about, there were 7 officers there, and I'm former retired military. This looked like a professional SWAT team. I will say, there's nothing the police department can do to stop that kind of a situation. Here's a person who goes shopping, and I'll tell you what they do. So anyway, they staked out the apartment and tried and ask the chief, how long does it take to get a search warrant? Eons. They are outside the apartment, know what's inside, and there's nothing they can do. They waited and waited and waited, and then finally the person came out. Now here's the game, is that this person happened to have a rap sheet, and they were able to hold him until they got a warrant. And I'm not sure, they'll have to explain whether they had the warrant or because he had a rap sheet there. And they rushed the apartment, and here's how the police are getting beaten, is because there were 2 more males in there. Multiple ski masks and black clothes. So the question was, who was the mugger? The 2 inside, or the one they grabbed? Well, it turns out that now you've got to get with positive ID. What's positive ID? Well, inside, by that time, they'd smashed the iPhone, but there was a garbage bag with her possessions in it, inside this garbage bag. The question then was, which one of the 3? And apparently this person had said, hey, it wasn't me. You tried ID, so they can't get a positive ID. Well, it's DNA. So my wife's very small possession she had in the garbage bag. That went to the state crime lab, and they took DNA of the person they grabbed. The point here is, don't keep pointing at the police department. I watch these guys work, and these are professionals. We need solutions, but the solution is not trying to make our police department bigger. They are really, really good. So anyway, the long and short is, you've got to get to the community in there, not trying to make the police department do more. You couldn't have asked for more professional people than I watched for 15 minutes.
All right now.
So you've got to get to the inside
of Harbor House.
We're gonna try to
Okay,
continue with
that's
the
fine.
program, and give you more time to speak, so.
Awesome. So we'll continue. We got three more speakers. We'll take more questions from the community, and we'll continue this. Just quickly in regards to the policing numbers. So, you know, in regards to the upcoming comprehensive plan and the work that we'll do in terms of trying to hire the police department, we've worked with both, or I've been working with both police and fire to kind of address the adequate public facilities code and some of the you know, loopholes that exist currently in that don't allow for us to match up those numbers and have the exact amount of officers that we have on the floors. And I know that's been a concern of a number of residents as we continue with construction in the Eastport area, and you know, increase in residents. We want an increase in public services. So that's definitely something that we'll take seriously. I'd like to give our state delegation the opportunity to speak some of the things that they have going on and would you like, I mean, if you want, okay.
I want to address what that gentleman was talking about. Police on the beat.
Okay, yeah, after we hear from Chief Ed Jackson. All right, cool. So we'll do Chief Ed Jackson first, and then we'll follow through with the remaining two speakers. Did you prepare? Awesome.
Good evening. Good evening. Where do I start? Can everybody hear me? Yes. I have a bit of a cold, so please forgive me. Where do I start? I'll start real quick with a brief commentary. I know the blog came out, which I'm not going to get into, questioning my suitability to be a police officer. I'm a career police officer. I left to become an academic. I was a college professor. I was an inspector general, and then I took advantage of this opportunity, which I'm very proud of, to be a police in the capital city. But let me clarify this. No police chief. There's an expectation which I have to manage. It's not my job to run up and down the street and make arrests. That creates a whole lot of legal problems that we're not even prepared to discuss. It's my job to preside over the police department. It's not my job to go out and handle evidence. Now, make no mistake about it. I have the full authority granted to me by the mayor and the city council to exercise the authority of a police officer. And if something happens, I'm prepared up to putting my life on the line, like any of the men and women that I preside over. But the expectation that it's my role to physically apprehend offenders is, I think that's another conversation for another time. It creates more legal problems. Somebody has to be the arbiter. We have policies. That's why we have a rank structure. We have men and women from the rank of police officer all the way up to the rank of major, which is my deputy chief. And so what I'm prepared to do is come to you tonight to talk about the strategic plan, and we do have a plan. I don't believe in going anywhere or embarking in any endeavor without having a plan. The end of this month will make my 6th month in Annapolis as your police chief. 6 months. 6 months is a long time in the life of police chiefs now because societal problems are really very tough. I get it. I get it fully. I get the fact that Harbor House, divided by President Street, with the access of Madison Street, goes to a very challenged community for a lot of reasons. And I'm not going to stand here and blame anybody. People are not always responsible for their social and economic conditions. They're just not. But out of that, if we don't learn anything else tonight, out of that comes consequences. When you have hopeless poverty, when you have drug addiction, when you have absentee parents, when you have substandard living conditions, when you have schools that are not relevant, then it's like trying to plant apple seeds and expecting oranges to grow. You're going to have destruction. So it's my role. I was hired by the mayor and the city council to bring a more social approach to crime. Some of your better operating police departments in America, not just here in the city of Annapolis, anywhere in America, takes that approach, because crime, as I said in many public forums, is a manifestation of social problems. When you don't address the social problems, you're going to have crime. This notion that people act because they're inherently good or inherently evil, people generally act based on their conditions. And so what we're trying to do in the Annapolis Police Department is change the conditions. Before I go any further, by the way, I'm happy to report, and it's reactionary, but we have the person responsible for the 2 shootings at Harbor House in custody, charged with everything from malicious destruction to attempted murder. Use of handgun in commission of a felony. The individual responsible for the shooting is in custody. My men and women are out there. That's one of the things that I noticed when I first came here. I said that we have to be more visible. We have to shift from a very reactionary model to we have to be guardians. So I agree. The gentleman said that he would like to see more police visible, and I agree with that. I think that part of our role should be to prevent crime, not react to it after it occurs. But that's a paradigm shift, because the Annapolis Police Department, this is no indictment, and it's not a criticism of the men and women who so proudly and bravely served the police department, but that was the role, and those are the conditions that they operated on, very reactionary. The challenge that we have as law enforcement officials, if we're overexposed, then we're occupying the territory. I get those complaints too, when we're too visible, because then you don't enjoy your neighbors. When we're not visible enough, then that's a problem. And I get both ends of the spectrum. I really, really get that. So what we have to do is every day we wake up and we go out there and try to protect the community. It's a balancing act. It's not as easy. Yeah, I would be upset. I live in Baltimore City, or I was born and raised in Baltimore City, I should say, an environment where there's shootings everywhere. There's shootings in middle-class neighborhoods, there's discharge in upper middle-class neighborhoods. We have a gun problem in this country. We have guns are too available to people who shouldn't have them. I'm not here to critique the Second Amendment to the U.S. Constitution. I'm not here to talk about the Bill of Rights. What I am saying is that we have to reconcile collectively in the community. We have to be more vigilant. I like forums like this. I like the criticism because it holds me accountable. I should be accountable, so I have thick skin. You have to in this business. So I'm not here to defend myself. I'm here to tell you that we are embarking upon some things that we need to do to change. I like to get into the prison so we can get intelligence information so that we can solve some of these shootings that are unsolved, some of these homicides that are unsolved. I brought Stan Bradford in, and he's going to look at, which he's looking at every day he comes to work, some of these unsolved murders that's occurred in the city of Annapolis. We're going back, I don't know, Stan, 20, so far we start off with 20 years, is it?
Yes, it's a total of about 20 years, but we're looking at the first 3 or 4 years of some of the unsolved homicides.
Some of the unsolved, to look at it for a couple of reasons, to talk about what should have been done, to give it a second set of eyes in case the investigators who initially got involved in the case, many of them are retired, they're no longer here, but we're trying to look at those cases to see if there's anything that we can do to be able to prepare a case to take into a court of law. We're the executive branch of government, so we can prepare a case. All we need is probable cause to arrest somebody. All we have to establish is that they probably did it. But in order for somebody to be convicted of a crime and be taken off of the street, then the state has to prove beyond a reasonable doubt to a moral certainty. That's the state's attorney's job. So it's not enough for us to arrest the individual. We have to prepare a case that the state's attorney can take into a court of law or take before a grand jury to get an indictment. A lot of times we believe we have enough, but we're not the lawyers, we're the law enforcement. And so when we have enough to take people in custody, we do exactly that. But I really, really, really understand your frustration. I understand why you're here tonight. We only get our power from the community. I'll tell you what the problems that we have to reconcile that I'm working on every day. We have far too many people who see things and don't report it. I get that because they're afraid. They don't have trust in the criminal justice system. So what I'm trying to do is establish the kind of relationships that people do feel comfortable and work with our partners so that people will feel comfortable. Most crimes, ladies and gentlemen, if you don't listen to anything that I'm saying under the sound of my voice, TV, has done more damage to policing, the portrayal of policing. Most crimes are solved not because some cop sees a grain of salt in the corner and is able to attach it to a multi-terrorist. Most crimes are solved because people come forward with information. I'm here to tell you tonight, murder is everybody's business. I don't care if it happens in Woodside Gardens, Newtown 20, Harbor House, Bywater. I mean, I don't care where it happens. Everybody who lives in this city, it is their business. And it's their business. We need people to collectively come together. I'm a big fan, she's gone now, community court. When we get some of these cases, I want to establish a system. I'm still putting my administration together, but we want a system where you all come to court. You know, police is a criminal justice system. And that system comprises of three important, but separate, like Law and Order, the TV show, separate but equal entities to successfully prosecute somebody who has committed a crime against the peace and dignity of the state. That's the police department, that's the courts, and then that's the corrections. And so it's not just the police. So we need to get together and we need to hold all three accountable. But also we need to hold ourselves accountable. Make no mistake about it, there's not a police chief in America that's successful if they don't have the support of the community.
What is your opinion of stop and frisk?
Stop and frisk, as long as it's done constitutionally. In fact, I'm a big fan of stop and frisk. I think that that's been mischaracterized in media. I think that somebody said it tonight that we can't respond to crime based on pandering to special interests. Stop and frisk is a term. It's a Supreme Court decision, the 1964 case in Terry versus Ohio. What the Supreme Court did invariably is lower the standard. Before 1964, cops needed a warrant for everything. But what the courts did, those 9 justices, the warrant court did, was they realized that America had changed. Our founding fathers couldn't have imagined that people would walk around with AK-47s and 357 Magnums. They didn't exist during colonial times when the Constitution was crafted. So what the government did was lower the standard to give police officers that tool. And all you need is reasonable, articulable suspicion. Lawyers call it RAS. I got a couple of lawyers in here tonight, RAS. Reasonable, articulable suspicion. That does simply mean it's a compound word. It's a noun and a verb. Reason is the noun, and able is the verb. You put them together, you have the term reasonable. As long as an officer can articulate reasonably that this person is wearing or carrying a handgun for the purpose of committing a crime, then he or she has the constitutional right to stop that person. And what a frisk is, it's only a patting of the outer layer of the clothing, right? So if you pat the outer layer of my clothing, I find an object that the police officer believes to be illegal, I'm going from reasonable, articulable suspicion to what? Probable cause. Probable cause to search. You have probable cause has 2 components. Probable cause to search and probable cause to seize. So to answer your question, sir, I'm a big fan of stop and frisk if it's done in compliance with the Constitution. And that's what I want my office to do, to be able to use that tool.
Is that active in the police force?
We use it all the time, and I want my officers to be able to articulate, to be able to use their words, as we tell elementary school children. Use your words. What drew you to that person? And as long as you're able to make a reasonable argument, and the reason why they use reasonable, for the very reason everybody's sitting in here, you don't have to have legal training, be a lawyer or a police officer to understand why the officer did what he or she did. And as long as you're able to do that, and if you get a gun, then we just got a gun off of a woman, I believe, recently. I don't know when it was, but don't hold me. I read that today in my briefing packet. And the officer did a good job. At least the scenario I read was an excellent job. So yes, sir, I firmly believe, you can put that on the record, I firmly believe in stop and frisk. What I don't believe in is just randomizing people, you know, targeting people because of their race. You know, anybody could unlawfully carry a gun, you know. It's not only black people. You know, the Capitol Gazette, that wasn't a black man that went in there and killed, unfortunately killed those 5 journalists. So everybody, we have a lot of people walking around with guns, regardless of race, color, creed, or ethnicity, who have mental illness, who are drug addicted, and shouldn't have a gun. So I'm all for stop and frisk as long as it doesn't feed into the stereotype that all black men are armed and pose a threat. What I do believe in, whoever you are, and I want my officers to be out there to use the skills that we teach them to challenge anybody who may be unlawfully wearing or concealing a handgun. I hope that answers your question. Thank you. Yes, ma'am.
Chief Johnson, you mentioned that your plan that you have put together Thank you. Your plan that you have put together is to hope for social change, different steps for that. I wonder if anyone's ever considered, I live about 50 yards off the Harbor House, if anyone's ever considered somehow taking the good families that are in there, the ones with children who walk to Eastport Elementary every day, and putting them all into one of those buildings together, where we have good, positive feedback and more role models for all these families, and they can feel a little bit safer. I'm sorry?
I'm saying, how do you determine a good family?
Well, they don't have a police record. Let's just start with the families that have children. Let's do that. Because we have a lot of good families in there, but everybody's intermingled, and the kids can't even come out of the house to play. They don't come out to play. It's not safe for
And
them.
I think you're the right idea. But let me say this before you go. I don't mean to interject, but I don't want to forget to say this. And by the way, when I talk about social change, here's the challenge. We have to do those things and get to the reason why crime occurs, but we also have to be very vigilant in our enforcement. In other words, we have to operate both at the same time. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand and say that if we're talking about social change, that's what I think most Annapolitans want. They just want the pendulum to swing and have some peace. And so to address all of those social issues that cause crime in the first place, that has really nothing to do with the police. They're human conditions. You have to understand those. That's my job. And at the same time, get the predators off the street. And so we really have competing interests. We have to do two things in tandem. Get those dangerous criminals off the street while at the same time working with families and communities. And as Mayor Buckley always talk about, I love the mantra, one Annapolis. An Annapolis that regardless of what your social, economic status is, regardless of what your race or ethnicity is, that we all see each other as wanting the same thing and and sharing the same values. And that value, when it comes to me, is public safety.
I understand. I know that the families in there know who the perpetrators are and who the bad people are. So can't we just ask for some of those people to be able to live in one of the buildings where there's less of that? I mean, there has to be some way to be able to do that.
I'll talk to you afterwards. I think you want to.
Thank you. I live on Boucher Ave. My name is Joe Donahue. Ma'am, I don't know your name. You raised an interesting viewpoint and maybe one perspective that we could a path we could go down. But one thing that I think is missing from this, and with all due respect, you have only been here 6 months, and I think some of the frustration here, 13 and 20 and 12 years and all of that. I don't think anyone in this room thinks that there's any magic wand that the police can wave and make this all stop. And one of the biggest problems that I see in this entire city, and specifically in Eastport, is that for decades, the city has decided that HACA and its occupants are not their problem. And this goes back a number of administrations, and sadly it carries forward even to the present administration, in that we're not, while Alderman Arnett talks about we can only pass laws and we can only pass a budget, well, the other important thing is that we enforce the laws that we have and that we appoint people who will enforce those laws as well. The city needs to be a partner with HACA and help themselves, because the ship has sailed. We sat around for a decade waiting for Newtown 20 to get funding. It didn't seem to catch everyone's eye a couple weeks ago. Newtown 20 was evacuated. It was abandoned by the Housing Authority, and I think the executive director, Ms. Maddox Evans, will speak to this as well. She needs help. She needs the city to assist the citizens of Annapolis fix this, and it can't be that we're going to wait around and wait for the funding from HUD. We have a very creative mayor who got elected on great ideas, and why can't we take that to the next level and start thinking big in a small town about how to fund, I'm not saying hit the taxpayers and have the taxpayers redevelop Haka. I'm saying we have all kinds of creative mechanisms that the city could reach out to the state. We've got senators and delegates in the room tonight. Why can't we partner to make this community better instead of pretending like we can fix it with one fell swoop, or the new police chief to come in here and become a whipping boy for all of this? The fact is, this stuff can be fixed if we work as a team, but it's just, these listening sessions are, I mean, they're just laughable. At the end of the day, if we're not gonna, if this administration leaves and then city council members roll out and we get new council members, if nothing's actually done, these little structural things don't get implemented, we don't inspect the housing authority when that's the law, then of course the buck is gonna get passed. I'm sorry, went a little long.
Okay, sir, I'm gonna have Ms. Maddox Evans, she's gonna come up and speak to your question. I think both of your questions, to be honest with you.
Thank you, Chief. You know, it's just sitting there, it's kind of like you have somebody talking about you right in a room and doesn't give you the opportunity to speak. And, you know, everybody has a lot to say for obvious reasons about Haka and the HUD people and, you know, the good people, the bad people. Of public housing, but what I'd like to say is that we're all the same people. The people that are within our public housing communities have the same expectations for safety and in privacy, protection of their civil rights as all of you. And it's very important for us to not have the type of distinctions that I'm hearing that are coming across. Because our families are suffering as well. We had a shooting that occurred in which bullets came through a house where there was a mother and an infant, which could have been tragic. We have our own board commissioner the other week whose car was shot out, both his cars, in a shooting. Housing authority constituents are citizens of this city. We vote. We carry out the same duties, we work, we do everything else that every other normal citizen does. In that respect, we have expectations also. We would love for there to be a concrete community policing plan in which police officers are able to build trust within our community and the relationships. Regular faces, even if there are officers, which some are, to a certain extent, assigned to our properties. Our families need to see the same officers every day to become familiar so that they can get to the point where they can share information and not feel that there's going to be retribution coming back to them. Some of the things that we can do, we are in talks with HUD about creating some of our vacant units to be police substations, so that police officers can have more flexibility to be stationed at our sites. That's something that we can do, that we are working on with HUD. We are working on hiring for a new community safety manager to develop a comprehensive plan for all of our sites to deepen the partnership, the great partnership that we already have with the Annapolis Police Department, who, by the way, works intimately with us every day. So I'd like to talk to you a little bit about the process, the due process system that we have, that we're required to have for federally funded properties. And yes, the properties that are public housing properties are subsidized by the federal government, which means we are bound by HUD regulations in addition to local and state regulations with regards to landlord-tenant law. Those HUD regulations allow for housing authorities to have discretion to manage their properties, particularly when there's criminal activity and drug-related activity. In order for us to move towards termination of a family, however, we need substantial evidence. It is a great deal of evidence that we need against a particular family before we initiate any kind of termination action against that family. And when we do, that's in partnership with the Annapolis Police Department, which we do every single day. So once we receive a police report, if there's a public housing address that's tied to our unit, which we usually get because the suspect has either given that address or might even have that address on their driver's license, we immediately begin an investigation. And once we are able to actually tie that person to our unit in terms of a resident that actually lives in our properties, we are able to proceed further. One of the things that you will have to understand too is that many of these incidents have no direct relation to any of the residents that live at our site. That's right. Bring it up. They're trying to also figure out why do people feel comfortable being here and conducting illegal activity. And primarily it's because they are a vulnerable community. There's a perception that there may not be as much patrolling or police. Even if there is, there's just this perception that maybe, you know, it's not paid attention to in the same way as a more affluent community. So people get this impression that they're allowed to, you know, conduct their illegal, you know, business. Of course, that's something that we combat. We do we work with the police department to increase patrols. We ask for undercover patrolling so that it's not always obvious, because guess what? Bad guys are really smart. And once they learn where police are patrolling, they change, you know, their modus operandi. And so but that's something that we're working with the police department. So I don't want you to think that HACA isn't doing anything, you know, HACA needs to do this or we would love, you know, for example, I heard the suggestion, you know, HACA needs a security force. Yes, that would be great. And so we would need funding. And so if there are local or state funding sources that could help fund that effort, we would gladly have our own security force. And so there are a lot of things that we need to address, and more, as has already been mentioned, more and more on the local level. So the more we embrace all of our communities and realize it's up to every single one of us to come up with solutions, I think we could see the needle moved in this area. That's all I have to say, but if you all have any specific questions, I'll be happy to answer. Yes.
I don't have a question, but I do have something to say. I agree with what you said, that we're all citizens, and I agree there's a lot of things that have to go on in this city, in this county, and all of that. One thing we can't do is point fingers at each other and say there's a couple of good people here and good families there that we have to put in the house and determine which ones are bad and different things like that. That's not true. We're all citizens, and you don't know which ones are bad until they commit a crime. And the police and everybody's doing as much as they can. The citizens, we are trying to help each other as we can. We have to look out for each other instead of just pointing fingers at everybody saying, this community is bad, we know who did it, and all this other stuff. That's all I have to say.
And that type of action, so you know, would be considered a fair housing violation by HUD if we were to do something like that. So just to give you a little context. Yes, sir.
So in preparation for this meeting, I did a little homework.
Yeah.
And Chapter 5, Security Planning for HUD-Assisted Multifamily Housing, is on the internet. You have your plan. And it tells the mayor he's required to fund the policing for the housing.
Start over again.
And he does.
Here, start over again.
The mayor is required to fund the policing for the housing authority. And what we just read recently was that there's insufficient funds. I support you 1,000% in getting dedicated police officers, stations, substations within the authority. It's all right in here. If all you have to do is take this, sit down with the mayor, maybe take a few dollars out of his Ferris wheel and put them into and put them into the housing project, I think we will all support you in doing that. But I have extra copies of this. If you'd like to have it, here is the authority.
Thank you. All right, any more questions? Yes, sir.
I don't have a question, but I do have a statement. My name is Archie Trader. I'm the Recreation Department Director. And the young man over here alluded to a partnership between the City of Annapolis and the Housing Authority. And I'm here to say that for over 14 years, the Recreation Department has been in full partnership with the HACA youth programming and community programming. For over 14 years, we've established various programs from aquatics to golf, from basketball, after school, out of school programs. And that continues to happen. Now, this may be very irrelevant in a situation like this, and even minute. It may mean nothing to any of you, but I can tell you this, that recreation and leisure time activities associated with youth is extremely important, especially in the summertime.
I had a comment here. Can I make my comment now? I'd like to apologize to DeWine for interrupting you before. I thought you were cutting off all comment. And I'd like to thank the chief and welcome him to town. I really enjoyed what you said and all the officials that are here. But it was just one point that this gentleman made over here about police walking the beat. I lived in Manhattan in the late 80s, peak of the crack epidemic. The whole city was terrorized by this. It was really a terrible place to live, and the police actually, you never saw police. I mean, I don't know where they were hiding, but they only came out after a crime was committed. When Mayor Dinkins was running for mayor in '88, he made it a promise. I'm going to put cops back on the beat, and they're going to walk regular beats every single day and night. And he did that, and I saw whole neighborhoods change almost overnight. I mean, there was a friend of mine lived on 16th Street at 8th Avenue. There was a drug market on that corner for years and years and years. Within months, it was gone. And the city got improved along the way, and Giuliani kept going with that program. And I knew some kids on 16th Street who got to know the police, and the police got to know them, and they had a relationship, and it just made it like a much more enjoyable life for everybody. And it's so simple. Just walk the beat. Same guys walking the beat every night. You get to know them. People get to know you. It's not hard. It's not hard. And it worked in New York, and it's worked in other places. I don't know why it can't work here.
I really want to give our state delegation the opportunity to speak, and then we'll jump right into any remaining questions and wrap things up.
Good evening. Delegate Alice Kane is going to come up as well. Delegate Shanika Henson had to run back to the State House. I want to just, first of all, thank everybody for being here tonight. I know that we've been here many, many times. We all know there aren't easy solutions here, but working together, I'm confident that we can make some progress. Speaking of partnerships and shifting the culture and supporting our youth, we were late to this meeting because we were in a 6-hour hearing on the biggest education policy that we're going to see in the state in 2 decades, to put more money into schools, particularly schools with high concentrations of poverty, to provide the social workers and the safety nets these kids really need to succeed. I also see Elijah Wilson's mother, Michelle, in the back, and I just want to thank her for allowing us this summer, or this fall, we took 2 busloads of children from public housing to visit colleges, 4 colleges around the state, to provide them with an idea, an inspiration, a goal to set forward. So we are working on those kind of softer pieces of providing inspiration and support to the community, but we're also working on kind of the hard funding that our city needs. So we are, as you probably read in the paper, last year we passed a bill, the pilot, the payment in lieu of taxes at the state level that the state provides to the city for all of the state buildings that they don't pay taxes to the city. We passed that bill at $750,000 last year, bipartisan support through the House and the Senate. The governor chose to let that go into law without signing it. This year he chose to cut that money by about $400,000, not just this year, but in perpetuity. And so we are fighting every day to make sure that we get that full funding to come back to the city to support the good work of our first responders and our police and our city government. So that's priority number 1 for us at the State House. Another priority is getting all of the state resources we have available to the city. So that includes primarily the Governor's Office of Crime Control and Prevention that has $100 million in grants to help us fight crime in targeted ways. So we are working hand in hand with the director of that, meeting with him regularly. I do want to also thank the mayor and the council. Our delegation has met with them one-on-one to work together. We say there's no such thing as a city problem, a county problem, a state problem, a federal problem. We understand that to you, our constituents, there's a problem and it needed to be solved. And we are working together hand in hand every single day to do that. Another issue that we're working on, and it was covered in the Capitol this week too, is recognizing that our state law has allowed for discrimination in public housing. And we are fixing that. Saying that everybody who lives in public housing deserves to have the same inspections and licensing standards of those of us who live in private housing. Very simple. That is not a silver bullet solution to any of these problems, but that is making sure our state code reflects the values of our community, which is about equity, and it's about fair housing, and making sure that everybody deserves to live in decent, safe, affordable housing in our community. And so with that, I forgot to introduce myself. I'm sorry to the folks in the room. My name is Sarah Elfrith. I have the pleasure and the privilege of serving you in the state Senate. We had to come a little late because we're in the middle of session. We have to leave a little early. We have to get to the House and Senate floor by 8 p.m. to take votes. And so I apologize if we're not able to speak to you after this, but please reach out to any of our offices. We work for you, and we will continue to be a partner to this administration, to this police department, to everybody in this room, to make sure everybody lives in a safe community. Thank you.
I just want to echo that and say, Jess and everyone who spoke up tonight, I hear you and your anger and exasperation. I feel the same way. The 12-year-old girl you mentioned should not have to live like that. You should not have to live like that. None of us should have to live like that. There's something very broken right now, and it does give me hope to walk into a room full of people who want to fix it. So as Senator Elfreth said, we are going back to take some votes. I want to tell you a little bit about what we voted on so far related to trying to prevent gun violence. We had a vote last week in the House where we closed a loophole to the long gun bill, where right now there's a number of long gun purchases and transfers that can happen with no background check whatsoever in Maryland, a state that is known for strict gun control law. So we voted overwhelmingly to close that on a bipartisan basis. We are taking up some additional bills in the next few weeks that passed the House last year but died in the Senate. One of those is the bill to ban ghost guns. These are untraceable guns that pieces can be printed on 3D printers very easily. And that was something actually that Speaker Bush was very important to him, that we ban that from happening in Maryland. Did not go all the way through the process last year, but we're hopeful, and that is gathering momentum and support. There was also a piece of legislation that passed last year that the governor vetoed, that we overrode his veto earlier this year around the concealed carry law. And political appointees were overturning law enforcement and giving something like 80% of the people who applied that law enforcement said should not, based on things like domestic abuse, have guns, we're getting those guns. So that's not going to happen anymore. There's other bills. I introduced a bill. I went through the gun violence prevention task force that Stuart Pittman brought together looking for ideas for state policy. One of them is reporting a gun lost or stolen within 48 hours instead of the current 72 hours. So that's something that, seems like common sense that the task force asked for. So we're going to make that happen. But even if all of these bills pass and become law in July or October, as would be the case, that's still not going to solve the problem, every day until then or every day after that. Does it help put a dent in the problem if it keeps some guns out of some hands or makes it harder for some people to get them? Hopefully, but that's not going to solve the problem. And as Senator Elfreth said, this is not a state problem, it's not a federal problem, it's not a county problem, it's not a city problem. It's not a community resource problem. It's all of that, and I think it does take all of us working together, all levels of government, all levels of the community, to keep trying to figure it out, and trying to make Annapolis a place where we tackle this the way it needs to be tackled. I know it doesn't happen down the street. I know it does happen with all of us working together. And what I've been, the quotes that have been running through my mind this meeting is that quote from Einstein about insanity. keep doing the same thing the same way, time after time, and expect a different result, that's insane. We gotta do something different. I think a lot of us up here want to do that. And so let's keep working together and figure it out. Nadine from my office is here. She'll be here till the end. And I know I speak for Senator Elfreth and Delegate Henson in saying, you know, let's keep the conversation going. And anything you can think of that we can do that we're not doing, you know, call us, write us, email us, stop us on the street and tell us. We want to solve this as much as you do. So help us be part of the solution.
We have about 5 minutes before we have to run back to the State House. Yes, ma'am.
When you talk about getting guns off the streets, even 1 gun or 2 guns or whatever would make a difference, what's our policy in Annapolis about a gun buyback program to get rid of illegal guns, unregistered guns? It's been very successful in other cities. I'd like to know if we ever tried it. What's our police chief's policy on that? And is that something that we would consider? Because 1 less gun is 1 potential gun that could shoot somebody, okay?
Absolutely. So we know that we have very strong gun laws on the books here in Maryland. Unfortunately, we have a lot of guns being trafficked in from Virginia and Pennsylvania, and we have straw purchases of guns, which hopefully lessening that reporting period is going to make people not want to straw purchase guns on behalf of people who shouldn't have guns. So we're working on that, working with our state police to identify ways to stop that flow of trafficked guns into the state. Now on the buyback program, that's the chief, and whatever we can do to be helpful.
Right. And I like what you said about one of the biggest problems, you hit the nail on the head, is the straw purchase. And for those of you who don't know what a straw purchase is a big problem that's not talked about enough. A straw purchase is when you get somebody who can legally buy a gun to buy it for somebody and then pass it on to somebody who shouldn't have it. I said at a previous meeting, I'm not a big fan of, and been involved in many of them, of gun buybacks. And here's why. Generally, when you have gun buybacks, people give up what they don't want. I don't know one single case that was solved from a gun buyback. All it does is, in fact, if you go into it should be on Google, but if you search it, it may pop up. One lady got on TV very recently, and it wasn't in Annapolis, of course, it was in Baltimore City. She said, while she was standing in line to turn in a gun, she said, I'm going to upgrade. I'm going to sell this one and take the money and buy another one. It's a true story. And so obviously, for those reasons, at least in my mind, my professional opinion is that they are not as effective. It's one of those things that we do, and it feels good, because you say buy a gun back. You don't know how many guns are coming from Richmond, Virginia, Pennsylvania, guns coming to this country from, especially on the East Coast, throughout ports. And so there needs to be a larger discussion. Secondly, what I am for, though, I'm for incentivize. We talked about that standing. I talked about that this morning coming down here. I am all for taking that money and to provide people, maybe establish a hotline to call in illegal guns. People who are acting suspiciously or people that you know shouldn't have a gun, and you can call in anonymously, much like Metro Crime Stoppers, and then we can get the guns out of their hands, because the object is to get the guns out of the hands of the people who shouldn't have them. A big gun buyback, you could probably 60%, I don't know what the stats are, don't hold me to that number, but I would argue that probably 6 out of 10 people are just getting rid of guns they don't want. Widows getting rid of guns that their husbands had to protect their home. Guns are just inoperable. I worked homicide along with Stan. I'm a former homicide detective. I've never ever fired a gun. I don't know Stan didn't speak to that, but I've never fired a gun that solved the case through a gun buyback. Never. Search warrant, something different. Search and seizure warrant signed by a judge, that's something different. Through a criminal investigation, absolutely. But a gun buyback, it's nice optics to see a stack of guns, but when you finally go through them, the serial numbers are often obliterated, so you don't know where they came from. You can't trace them. So anyway, I hear that a lot. I'm sorry, but for those reasons, I don't mean to give a dissertation, but I think it's a mistake to expend that kind of money. They're very expensive as well.
So we have one more time for a question for the state delegation. Archie, will be able to save it for a citizen by any chance? They just only have one more question. I'm sorry, but you work for the city, by the way. Okay, nobody else has a question, so you can go ahead.
Oh, thank you for the opportunity. I understand that over at least 25 states, the stand your ground law does exist. Has anyone proposed the stand your ground law in the Maryland legislature?
This is a moment I wish Delegate Henson were here. She's the only attorney amongst us. So no, we don't have that law. We have self-defense as a defense, and maybe the chief can back me up here. But in terms of that affirmative defense, I don't believe that we have that, and I'm not sure I would agree that that would help solve some of the problems here.
I'm not advocating it, don't get me wrong.
Okay.
I'm just curious.
No, thank you.
I'd like to make a comment with the stand your ground. When I watched my wife being dragged along the pavement and I was driving and I reached in and thought I should, 3 of the 7 officers who were on the scene went by and volunteered to me. He said, if you had a weapon, you'd be dead on the pavement now. He says, the stupidest thing you can do is carry a weapon in an environment like we have. That's all malarkey.
Okay, so that's it for our state delegation. We'll take 5 more minutes from, we'll take 5 more minutes to open up questions to the floor. Any individuals here? I understand that it's President's Day. We appreciate you being civically engaged today. So, Frida, if you'd like to start us off with that.
Yes, I have a question for Chief Jackson. I live on the Eastport Peninsula, and I was shocked today to find gang a sign tagged on a post office mailbox. Is there a gang issue in Annapolis? Could you give us an update, please? That's the first I've seen gang anything. Thank you. Thank you.
In the interest of time, I'll wait around because you piqued my interest. I would like to know what it looks like and whether it's is it a fix, like permanently marked or?
It's like spray painted on with all kinds of weird symbols.
Yeah, I'm of the opinion that due to the state of our society now, not only in Annapolis, no society is immune from gang problems, even in the most affluent neighborhoods. And I can say this with all confidence, they're having problems within our military and our armed forces. It's everywhere, it's permeated everywhere. It's a big social problem, and Annapolis is no immune. So, yes ma'am, the problem is that we have to get in front of it and have to do everything that we can to dismantle it. And there are success stories if you get in front of it. Once it metastasizes, it's like cancer, you can spend years, getting rid of it. So you have to get out in front of it. But I'm interested in to know what you saw.
We'll talk later.
Yes, ma'am.
Next one, Jane, right here. I got next up.
I'd like to bring the question back to Jess's point about property management. I hate to call you Melissa, but everybody knows you. Everybody knows you as Melissa, which I think is a good thing. Could you talk, you have so many people here tonight that really want to help solve the problems at Hawkinson. Could you talk about what would help you with property management? Because really, at the end of the day, you're a bricks and mortar rental business, and you've got challenges. You don't have the money for security, but could you talk about other things that could work, parking enforcement? What we need is for folks not to feel comfortable on President Street or Newtown Drive or Robinwood shooting at each other. We're selling property. Seems basic.
Sure. Well, there's lots of things that people can do to help. One of the things that we are working on internally is putting together a plan, which sounds like it may not relate, but a beautification project for our properties. And it also helps, one, the residents instill pride in where they're living, and also it helps visually, when you aesthetically change the environment, it's interesting the impact that it has on behavior. And so that's one of the things that we are interested in. So if you have resources, of contractors or landscape folks that want to help or assist with our beautification project, we would love information on that. We have an extensive amount of social service programs, but we can always
used more. One of the things that we would also like is more resource on career opportunities. If you have businesses that would like to hire, a lot of our residents, we are always promoting employment opportunities. So career development, more activities for our children to participate in. So there are a variety of options, and if you want to get specific, if you have a service or some sort of goods that you provide or you have a connection with, I would love to speak with you to see how we can partner to be able to change our overall environment. Our goal is to make sure our properties are not distinguishable from the entire neighborhood, and that's going to take some work. That's why we're embarking on revitalizing our entire public housing portfolio, because we don't believe you should never be able to look at a particular community and say that's where lower income people live, or here's where people live that may have lower means than other people. That should never be by the outside of physical building stock. So one of the things that we're doing is embarking on revitalizing our entire portfolio, but in the meantime we would like to begin that process even on a smaller level. So those are just some practical things that I think can help.
Just a second before you start your question, Alderwoman Finlayson wanted to respond, and then we'll go straight to you.
I'll use my teacher voice if you like.
Good evening. First of all, I distributed a handout when you came in. This is not the first listening session or the second. This is the third opportunity for the community to share with us your ideas. And some of the items that are on that list are already in process. But what I really wanted to speak about this evening was what we haven't touched on, and that's education. I'm a retired educator, 35 years, Anne Arundel County Public Schools, represented the 6,000 teachers at the time in our school system. And I have been the greatest advocate for not only our teachers and administrators, but our students. But I strongly feel that our school system is letting us down. The young people, and I say they're young people because relatively they are, who are causing much of the crime on our streets today are lost. They have graduated from high school. They could not go to college because they didn't have the academic wherewithal. They could not get into a vocational program because that's already maxed out. And so they graduate them with nothing to do. And so what do you expect them to do? They are going to be drawn to, unfortunately, a negative element in the community that's going to pay them some money to do something bad, but give them a means of supporting themselves and very often their families. So what do we do about this? I haven't heard anyone say that we need to go to the school system and bang on their doors and convince them that when every kid graduates from high school, they should have something viable to do in our community. They should have a job, a skill, a profession to pursue, but they should have something to do. The senator mentioned the Kerwin report and the funding, which no question is astronomical. I still haven't heard that there's a guarantee that every young person who graduates will have a career path. And I'm not saying they all have to be doctors and lawyers, but they have to graduate with something to support themselves in a positive way so that they are all contributing to our community. So I am asking you, as you're thinking about what can be done, don't let the school system off the hook. Don't let the county executive off the hook. Don't let the governor off the hook. They should all be guaranteeing that when every kid graduates from a high school, whether it's here in Anne Arundel County or Allegheny, Maryland, that they have something viable, some means of supporting themselves so that they are contributing members of our community. Thank you.
This is not as long-term visionary as Ms. Finlayson, but I have seen, and I know in my neighborhood, on my street, lots of people have cameras at their doorbells. And I was wondering if there, and I have read about that, what do you think about increasing the number of cameras in the areas that are difficult?
So we'll allow the chief of police to respond to that question in regards to, if you're missing what you said, some jurisdictions across the country have created partnerships and programs with companies like Ring and Nest, where they allow police departments to obtain the footage necessary from those properties to assist in crimes. And I just like allow him to speak to that quickly, and then we'll take 3 more questions because it's a school night, all right?
Yeah, the short version of it is they provide tax incentives. They encourage residents to purchase, and even in Baltimore City, they're talking about even having grant money to get doorbells that captures the outside of your property, so that when events occur, crimes occur, police officers can come and, actually, if they can look at your footage, you can show it to them through your iPhone. I think it's a great program, and it does work. But far too many communities, they don't have that technology, and even people with means that can afford it often don't see the need, but it's a very important tool to aid us in helping identify people. And not only that, one last thing, the beauty of it too has been, and don't quote me on who did the research, but there has been research on that to show that when you have those tools, people are less apprehensive to come on your property and commit crimes.
Quickly, Alderwoman, quickly.
Thank you. One quick thing. I want to piggyback on something that Alderwoman Finlayson said. I am the school and community liaison specialist for Anne Arundel County Public Schools. I've been in that position since January of 2006. I recently have been at the Board of Ed after being in an elementary school for about 7.5 years. And one thing, and there is a disconnect. I work in the Office of Equity and Accelerated Student Achievement, and I'm going to ask each one of you to ask everybody else, I need for you, and piggybacking on what she said, to flood my office with phone calls that you need me, because I'm working there now, as well as Alderwoman Finlayson, to say that you really need me out here in the community, in the schools, working for you. I'm already doing it, but I think sometimes the sense of it is not as pervasive as we want it to be. But if you call 410-222-5000 and you flood the Office of Equity with phone calls and emails, Dr. Maisha Gillens and Dr. Lorenzo Hughes are our leadership within that office. If you would flood them with phone calls and emails, you can get their email addresses off the website. Please do that, because that would help me to help you tremendously. Thank you so very much.
Mr. Mayor.
Wait. We had an order. I'm sorry. We had an order.
Mr. Mayor and members of the City Council, I want to compliment you on bringing other members of leaders of your departments here, because every meeting I've been to for the last 3 years have been just the police officers, and this is far more than the police. A question I have that's very specific, because there's been a lot of broad conversations about what's going on nationally, the state, and the county, but we're really talking about 3 blocks that a lot of the gunshots are going on. And it'd be great to hear, not here necessarily tonight, but in the newspaper and later, what's going to happen in these 3 blocks is going to stop all of the gunfire. The question I have specific though is, right now at the corner of Madison and President Street, we have an open air drinking club that operates most of the year. And I don't understand, if I was a child over in Hackow or anywhere else in that neighborhood, and I saw grown adults outside drinking all day and into the night, I'd start to wonder what it is about life and what's going on. And I know the police will tell you that drinking starts problems. Now, I'm not opposed to people drinking, socializing, but I don't think it should be able to be viewed by the public from those housing projects.
Okay, and we really appreciate that question. I'll just, two quick responses to that. First of all, it's not Hocker property, that's across the street. Secondly, we will, I'm just clarifying. Secondly, we'll follow up with the police department on that. I'll put in a request. I know what you're talking about, and we'll make sure that we follow up on that.
The other thing is we have Mr. Gerald here, who's our city manager, so that's another person within the mayor's office as well.
Awesome, thank you very much. Judy?
Hey, everybody, I live down on 7th Avenue. If we ever had a turnout like this for Eastport working together, we could get so much done. Please come out tomorrow night. I look around the room and there's maybe 10 people in this room that I see on a regular basis. We were forced to go back to quarterly meetings because we were getting no turnout. So we brought it back to monthly. Please show up because we can help.
What is that?
Next.
We've been working together. It's been going on for 2 years.
How did we hear about it?
I post it every month on Eastport.
I don't need the microphone. I post it every month, as Jessica does, on Eastport Neighborhood Forum. We meet at the community center right over here on President Street.
You gotta move it from there. I'm not going there.
Why?
Oh,
see, that's the problem. Oh, wow. There you have it.
That's the problem.
You must not vote.
All right, so, and on that note, Jessica?
Hi, so I wanted to speak on a couple of the different things here. First of all, I want to assure you that I walked to the Eastport Community Center from my house, and I know that there are crime issues, and I know that that can be frightening, but I promise you, you are safe walking there, and I hope that you will come out and not, it's that one. Can you turn that one off, because it's... And you are safe walking there, and please join us, because there is a large portion of the population that needs to be there, and they can't, for whether it's reasons of small children or transportation, make it to other places. The people that we need to be working together need the meeting to be there, and we all need to be there together in one place. It is a safe place. I walk there, I look just like you, and walk there by myself from my house, and I'm safe, I promise you. I wanted to speak a couple things. First of all, in regards to the cameras, additionally to the ring, can you tell us the status of the cameras in Eastport, in the greater President Street, Madison Street area? Are they all online and operational and working?
The street or
the police cameras, the public
these
cameras.
Yeah, Jess, they're gonna answer that for you.
Okay.
Not all of the cameras are functional, but the vast majority of them are.
They don't need
We bought an entirely new generation of cameras for the entire area. We have the cameras now in inventory. We just haven't set them up yet.
And what is the timeline for getting them installed?
I don't have it right now. I should have it by the end of the week, certainly.
Okay. And what is the status on the shot spotter technology?
Right now, we're in an agreement with BG&E. They're going to set up the new, BG&E is actually picking up the entire freight for the program for the first 3 years. So we're just going to treat it like a regular call for service. They're going to contact us when the sensor net detects a gunshot. They're going to notify us through our communication center and a couple other ways. We're still figuring out how we're going to do it, whether it's going to be by text or whatever, but it's going to come through our regular call center with the regular call for service. And it'll triangulate where it came from, how many shots.
Okay. And what's the timeline for that?
I don't have that right now.
So the equipment has been ordered, it has been received, and BGE has a plan to start installing it on March 9th.
Perfect, thank you very much. I wanted to speak a little bit, when we're talking about beat cops, and we're talking about exactly what Ms. Maddox-Evans was discussing about the safe haven. The one thing that is really important about a substation and about beat cops is that while I understand, Ross, that undercover cops are important and they're doing their job, that's not what we're discussing here. What we're discussing is having police officers make a presence in the community, because let's be honest, it's all business, right? The people that are out there are doing business. They don't live in our neighborhood. They come to our neighborhood to do criminal business, and they do it because they don't see police and they're not afraid of doing what they are doing. So if we have beat cops out there, if we have a substation, if we have a presence where they do not feel comfortable doing their business, in the parking lot across from my house, or in the parking lot next to the pool, or anywhere in the greater Eastport area, we won't have the criminals. We won't have people getting mugged on Boucher Avenue. We won't have drug activity taking place. We won't have shootings taking place because they won't feel comfortable being there. And that is just a basic, it's a basic function of business, right? It's a business proposition. They are doing business. They won't do business where there are going to be people who are going to stop them from doing their business and potentially ruin their business plans. And I think that that's really important. I have been here long enough that I have been here when there was a substation, and it was important, and it helped. I have been here long enough that I was here when HACA and the city had a financial relationship, and the city provided police officers on a regular basis in a security format, off-duty police officers, because putting in together a whole security force was a lot more expensive than working with the city to create their own security force based off of off-duty police officers. I've been here long enough to see those things here. I've been here long enough to see them work. I've been here long enough to see them taken away by one person after another person after another person. Those things did work, and if they were brought back and kept for a regular long-term basis, they will work and they will keep our whole community safer. This is about all of us. It is not about residents in one or the other. I often like to use, for those of you who don't know, Watergate and Harbor House were built at the same time by the same developer. The buildings, the low buildings at Watergate are the same, if you look at them, the same as the low buildings at Harbor House. And they were built as luxury condominiums, and just like in Watergate, just like, it's the same thing. People are people no matter where they live. The majority of people who live in Watergate are great people, upstanding citizens who don't do criminal activities. There are some who do criminal activities. The majority of people who live in the Harbor House buildings are great people, upstanding people who don't do criminal activities. The only reason that they live in one versus the other is who is paying their rent. Right? That's what it comes down to. We are all the same people, but we can't continue to say that those are the wrong people and those are the right people or those types of things. But I also wanted to speak on the education thing. I am on the Education Commission, for those of you who don't know. Alice Kane, our delegate who was up there, was on the Education Commission. They have done great things. This is an Annapolis commission, and contrary to what I was going to say this before Sheila said something about it. Anyway, we have an achievement gap in our community, and our poor students they start school behind, they end school behind, they don't get what they need on the way. This month, on February 3rd, the city's Annapolis Education Commission, sent a resolution to the city. It was a unanimously voted resolution asking the city to work with the school system and with their own departments like transportation and other things to start making sure that all of our students have transportation. I don't know how many of you are aware, but the majority of the children who live in Harbor House and Eastport Terrace have to walk 3 miles to get to and from school every day. These are our children who do not have the resources for their parents to drive them to school when the weather is cold, or like last week when it was cold and rainy every single day. The majority of those children don't have parents who can say, oh, it's okay, honey, I'll go into work late and I'll drive you to school. They either don't go to school or they walk 1.5 miles and 1.5 miles back in that weather. It is up to, there are plenty of things about education that our city doesn't have a say on. They don't have a say on who teaches our children. They don't have a say on what happens within the buildings, but they do have a say on those types of things. They can work to provide education so that our students we have first graders, second graders, third graders who have to walk 1 mile every day to Eastport Elementary. They can't get a good education. All of you who live along Bay Ridge Avenue, you see those kids going to school late every single day. You see, right, I just want to say, this is something that the city can do. This is something the city needs to do. The city needs to advocate for our students to the school system, to the county. You need to make sure that our kids are provided transportation. You need to make sure that when it comes up for the state funding, that the community school The community school applies to all of our Title I schools in the city of Annapolis, because programs like what they're doing at Tyler Heights, where there are medical programs in the school, where there are counseling resources in the school, we need that at Eastport, and we need that at Annapolis Middle. Because if you want to catch the people now, you want to catch them. If you want to get the people off the streets and give them a future, you need to catch them young. The programs like Archie was talking about, the REACH program, they are all important. And the guide that it's been written out, there are plans that have been put forward. Your transition team report put forward an entire plan as to how to help our most needy children in education and recreation, and it has been shelved and ignored. We need to do that.
I also recognize Lynn Farrell, who's our assistant city manager.
All right, so we're gonna do two questions. We'll take a question from the mayor, and for Mayor Moore, we'll take a last question here. We're done after Detective Seidel responds.
I don't really have a question. I have
I
have a couple of observations.
After he responds to Jessica's question.
What?
Captions.
Who? What? Who?
I just want to go over Captain Seidel. I'm in charge of everything but patrol. So a lot of the investigative ends, a lot of the special operations units go through me. Policing has changed in the last 3 years. The shooting on 11/25, the officer was 70 feet away. He was there within 7 seconds, and he detained 2 people. From that, it led to the arrest of the said person for attempted first-degree murder, the recovery of the weapon, and a ballistic match. I'm saying that for this reason. Officers on the beat, while maybe effective many years ago or recently, as of 5 years ago, are not as effective anymore due to the national climate when it comes to policing. That officer was 70 feet away, and the gentleman decided to take that shot. That's what I'm trying to implore people. Policing changes, we change, society changes. So we have to constantly battle that change and do a better job. All those things that have worked in the past do not necessarily work in the future. And all those things that we have done in the past do not necessarily respond as well as they should. So as we come through this process, you have to understand that the national climate has changed, individuals have changed, and the people that pull the trigger are a little different. Okay? So what works today is a multitude of facets. It's federal prosecution, it's long-term surveillance and takedowns. It's officers on the beat. I'm not excluding. I'm not saying that policing A is now moot and policing B is all that you have. But you have to adjust your policing model to be more efficient, effective for the change that is occurring within the United States, within Anne Arundel County, and within the city of Annapolis. And while that's easy to say, it's often hard to put into real, live, actionable items to get it done. But that's our job. That's what my job is to do. That's what your job is to do, and everyone's job. The idea of policing is just a different form that we have to adjust, adapt, and overcome. I don't want to put it out there, but that's what we're facing today, which is a little different than it was a year, 5 or 10 years ago.
Thank you. Mayor Moore, and then here.
You're right. Times do change. I remember 30 years ago when I was on the Public Safety Committee recommending substations, and the newspaper editorialized against it. So yes, times do change. I do want to address the issue that Frida brought up, however, because there is a process that we used in the past that was effective. One, soon as any tagging is seen, it needs to be reported a process that we used, what we did use effectively. It was reported to the police department. The police took a picture immediately. Public Works went out and painted over it because those are messages that are going out. And then it was put into the national system so that that picture that you took could be analyzed in terms of what was being said. We had gangs then looking at Anne Arundel or looking at Annapolis, but they weren't here. Because when you're vigilant and get rid of those messages, you're giving the message that you're watching. When you let those tagging messages stay around, the message is, we don't care. And therefore, you have a bigger infiltration of gangs. Yes, I think we do have gangs here now that we did not. I would also like just to point out that Tyler Avenue and Forest Drive are not in the Housing Authority properties. what happened on Sunday at 3:45 in the afternoon. An anonymous, who knows who they were or where they came from, shooting on a Sunday afternoon across Forest Drive with innocent people driving up and down that street, up and down that major road. How are we going to find? How are we going to identify and find the people that can hold us hostage? So that we have to rethink every way we want to move or drive in the future. Innocent people shot at, and those are Tyler Avenue and Forest and across Forest Drive.
And we have our fire chief with us tonight, Chief O'Malley as well.
Awesome. Very last question for the evening. Yeah.
Chief, once again, I'd like to apologize earlier for attacking my MPTC certification. I hadn't had dinner yet with my wife, so I'm an old man. But nevertheless, here I attacked you earlier. I'd like to defend you now. One of the problems, everybody wants beat police. I think what we have to understand is, in the past pre-911 system, you had beat police that weren't tethered to calls for service. And I understand, and once again, I attacked you because of the morale problem that agency had in the past. But if you don't have enough officers out there to take calls for service, they're backed up. The county I worked in a community where as soon as I got on shift, I was backed up 30 calls for service. So I was going from call to call to call. I didn't have time to check on, no pun intended, Grandma Newsbaum's dog barking in the backyard, or things like that. The resources need to be given to the chief and to the tactical unit here, so they can have the resources to add additional patrols, so these guys aren't backed up for calls for service. Or you don't have 6 units for the whole city, and if a call happens, a shooting call, then you're backed up 40 calls. I think our citizens need to understand that. If we can have you know why NYPD has foot patrols? Is because they have the resources and the funding to put guys on corners, and that's all they do. They put them on corners for visual, they wave at people, and they don't answer their radios. Okay, I've been doing this for years. I've ran tactical teams and teams that went against straw purchases. But the problem with the guns in the communities you have here are primarily straw purchases. Johnny's girlfriend is going to go buy 2 or 3 guns, and he's making a boatload of money, and everybody's carrying them. But nothing happens to her. Or if it does, she gets 2 years, and then it's steaded, and nothing happens. Okay? The chief has a lot on his hands because Annapolis was a quiet, sleepy town in years past, and the agency was not able to catch up with what's going on out there. So I applaud you, Mayor. He needs the resources. These guys need the resources and tools. You got to get our state delegates. You need the hotspot money that I used in my old county to get additional foot patrols or tactical units or strategic units out there to go up to the guys with the guns, to go into the hack-up. And if you have people that are selling drugs that aren't on a lease, to hit them with trespassing charges and then a victim and all kinds of things like that. It takes multiple agencies to work that, but it's an instant fix if we do that. Okay, this long-term 3 or 4 generational problem of addressing or attacking education and things, we're not going to see that in our lifetime. We want it here and now. I want to prevent another forced drive shooting happening if you have the tools and the resources. And I'm sorry if I'm a little aggressive on this, but that's the only way to fix it. Okay, we can't have beautification unless it's ballistic beautification that protects the citizenry. That's not an instant fix. We need an instant fix. Okay, I'm sorry. Thank you very much.
Awesome.
Mr. Alderman, I'm sorry, I meant that one thing, another tool, because there are a couple of other tools that have to do. I can't stand that, but nevertheless, it has to do with dogs. When you're talking about stop and frisk and whatever have you. You know, dogs are trained to smell drugs and a whole lot of other things. We had a network at one time of people who were ex-drug users, and their advice was, use your dogs. We don't have enough dogs in the police department. Actually, they ought to be out there walking on the street with the cops, because they can identify a drug person throws their drugs away. That dog knows where it is and who it came from. It is another tool to use. We need to invest in.
Absolutely. Awesome. So here we go. We appreciate everybody being here, honestly, again on President's Day. I know that you guys would be much rather doing a lot of other things. We take these concerns very, very seriously. I know I will immediately follow up with some of the requests that has been made tonight. We'll get on top of that. I'd like to give it over to Mayor Gavin Buckley to close out. Thank you guys very much again.
Look, thank you so much everyone for coming. I know it's late. I just want to tell you what we are doing. This is frustrating, just as frustrating to us as it is to the public. So we are acting, but this is what we're doing. We have a new police chief. We are trying a new policing model. We have more bike cops and foot cops than we've ever had in the city. We have new technologies coming to Annapolis through ShotSpotter, through upgrading the cameras. This stuff is happening. The best solution to crime is a job. We in the mayor's office are looking at ways to expunge criminal records, get people to work, get young people opportunities. We are doing things every single day to try to change the trajectory that we're on. So I want to give some shout out to the police department, to the crimes that they are solving. We are finding people. We are finding guns. We're finding the bad guys. That is happening. This rapid increase in gunshot is a horrible, horrible thing. But this administration is working on gun control more than anyone else has. We get death threats at the city and this stuff, but we're not backing down. We're standing up to the bullies because we have to stand up to the bullies. So, but we can only do it as a community, and we can only do it as a group of people, because I know everybody's here because they care, because they want to make things better. So thank you for being here. I'm sorry I'm still a bit jet lagged, but we really, really appreciate all you are doing. And can we just give a round of applause to our police department?